to begin. Rav Shelo, bavakasha.
Rabbi Grunstein, Nili Arbel will speak now, 2 minutes.
I'm sorry. Bavakasha, Nili Arbel. My apologies. If you can just introduce yourself to the crowd, Nili.
Hi, good evening. I'm Nili Arbel. I'm head of the gerontology department in Machon Be'er Emunah. And as always, we're grateful for this collaboration with Tzohar Ad 120, another webinar focusing on issues of the aging years. And let me just say a bit about Machon Be'er Emunah. Some of you know Emunah. We're part of the bigger Emunah, and one of our great focuses in our work in our Machon Institute in Jerusalem is gerontology, the aging years. We strive to address the most present issues in families in Israel, and we know that the aging years are taking over longer than in the past. So just a few words about what we do. We also train professionals, gerontologists, counselors that support families and individuals throughout these years. And we offer a care management service, which I think is probably relevant for many people here. It gives hands-on support for families throughout the journey of aging. So I could really say that every day I speak to a family that's reaching out, or a person who's reaching out and just is feeling lost, feeling alone in this new reality of having parents or a spouse dealing with decline in their functioning and changes, and what are the rights that I have? How do I access help? And I could say that, of course, every journey and every family has a unique twist and challenges, but I see that really everyone is seeking the same thing. Everybody is seeking someone. Just let me have someone who will hold my hand through this and tell me where I go, what I do, how do I balance these issues that Rav Yoshua mentioned of like also really respecting my parent, but also doing the right choices and decisions. So we'll hear a lot about this tonight. And also just that you know that both us in Machon Be'er Emunah and in our care management service and Tzohar Ad 120, we both can be an address for these issues. So maybe Tzohar will expand on their line later on. I want to just say that our care management service really gives hands-on support, helping families find the right services, practical solutions, but also to be sometimes an outsider that can really have discussions with the family in a way that sometimes when you're inside, it's much harder, dealing with bureaucracy, getting to the right people, and really just having someone that will walk you through this with you, and you'll feel less alone. So you'll receive afterwards with the recording of tonight also details about this, and you'll hear tonight really from the professionals. Amanda Klar is one of our, she's our professional guider. Amanda will say the term, but she's the professional address of our service. Yes, I am an Israeli native, but I do speak English. So I hope this evening will be significant for all of you.
Thank you so much, Nili, for that introduction. And I think without further ado, let's go over to Amanda. As I said earlier, Amanda, for those of you who here, is a nurse, a practitioner, and most importantly, is someone that hands-on, day in and day out, deals with this issue, with the patients on the one hand and with the families on the other. And therefore, I think she would be the most suitable to actually present some of the challenges that families go through at the bedside of their parents and how they deal with them. So without further ado, Amanda, pleasure to have you.
Thank you, Rabbi Grunstein. Thank you, Nili. Bichvod Harav, Rav Shelo. Good evening, everyone. As you've already heard, my name is Amanda Klar. I am a nurse practitioner who specializes in the care of the older adults. I work with Mahon Be'er. I've been working with them for over a decade, teaching in their gerontology program. And in the last couple of years have been a part of setting up Ma'atefet Zahav. And I am their professional advisor to date. And this evening, I'm going to talk to you about a topic that brings many families to my door and has many. In the 20 years I've worked as a geriatric nurse, I've had the kavod to assist probably hundreds of families in their journey with their aging parents. And the issue of refusing, what we call care refusal or refusing care, is one of the primary reasons people come to my door, to our door. I've worked as a nurse in the hospital, in the community. I currently work in residential care, and I've assisted families with their older relatives or their older adult relatives in all of these settings. And I'm going to talk to you, I'm going to give you a bit of a professional view of why these issues present and offer you some practical solutions with examples. And then Rav Sherlow will be able to give us the more halachic and ethical background to these issues as well. So we'll first address why. So what's the why? Why do older adults refuse care? Why do your parents refuse care? And there are many reasons, but one of the primary reasons is that getting older involves losing lots of things, many losses. They lose their work when they retire. They often lose their loved ones. Sometimes they have to move, so they lose their home. Sometimes they lose their health. And one of the primary things they lose is their function. And when that does happen, doesn't always happen, we wish for it not to, but when it does happen, they become more dependent. And this is a great loss, probably one of the greater losses. And as a result, often people try to take back control and they try and hold on. And I say they hold on with both hands, they hold on to their independence with both their hands, because they're trying to maintain and not to become dependent. And the way we can deal with that really is with all of the things that people lose as they get older. Our job as professionals in this field is to look for solutions to replace the things that they have lost. Now, if it was a job, if it was their work when they retire, we look for other meaningful activities that they might want to do. May it be volunteer, may it be do some different kind of job, may it be work in the community, maybe it might be a hobby that they want. So we look for ways to replace. And it's the same with function. In terms of function, when people lose aspects of their function, we can actually find things to help replace some of that dependence. So, for instance, someone who loses their hearing is a great loss of function. We can use hearing aids. Someone who loses their sight, we have glasses. Someone who loses their ability to walk, so we can give them a walking aid, or we can move them into a house with a lift. So the idea is to find ways to replace these losses in order to improve their functionality. So that's one thing. But you have to understand that it's a great loss for a person to lose their independence and become dependent. The other reason people refuse help is often they don't realize that they need it. Sometimes the people looking after them, such as yourselves, are doing such a great job of providing assistance that they're not actually aware that how much assistance that they need. So my classic example is my grandmother. My husband David had a grandmother who lived to be 104. She's no longer with us. And she was incredible, an incredible example of what we call successful aging. And she really was amazing. And this comes from an expert in all things old. And she, her last year of life, she came to visit us for Sukkot. And I took a video for my students because I wanted her to tell the students what it was like to get old. And we talked about her functioning, and she told me she was independent. She said that she did everything herself. She was able to cook and clean, and the truth is, I knew that it wasn't true because I knew, but it was amazing to hear her say it. She wasn't lying to me, and she actually felt like she was independent. And afterwards, I sent the edited video to her daughter, who is David's aunt, who was the person who provides most of the care. And she was shocked because she rang me and she said, "But Amanda, I'm in there every single day, cooking and cleaning and etc." And I think that basically I said to her, that's because you're doing such a good job that she doesn't even realize how much assistance she needs. So sometimes we have to do a bit of care withdrawal in a very gentle manner, obviously, in a very respectful manner, in order to help them understand, with the help of professionals, obviously, that maybe they actually require the assistance. And the third main issue that I see is that there is something called a family dynamic. All of us have them. Okay, families are living, I call them living organisms, and we all have our family dynamics. And by the time we reach a stage where we are starting to care for our parents, that family dynamic has often been around for like 50 years. Okay, so let's try, you can't change a family dynamic that has existed for 50 years. And if mum and dad were the boss and in charge, and the parents as they were, it's very hard for them suddenly to be able to accept help and assistance from their children. And not only that, it's not even about accepting help, it's also about being told what to do. So often the children will suddenly come in and start giving them advice and telling them what to do. And that's very, very challenging sometimes. It's a role reversal, it's a change of family dynamics. And here is where you really need outsiders to come in, people who aren't involved in the family dynamics, who are not emotionally involved, to try and help give perspective. And I mean, just yesterday, I had a gentleman in my office in the hospital who has been in hospital about 15 times in the last few months because he wouldn't accept help at home. And every time he gets a little bit weaker, and he's now in a geriatric ward because this has been going on for so long. And his daughter said to me, he won't accept care. I can't make him, we won't succeed. And we talked for a long time, myself, the social worker, the daughter, and this gentleman, very nice man, totally cognitively able. And firstly, we discussed the issue with him not accepting help and that he was in this very negative spiral, and we explained the consequences. But at the end of the day, I asked him why he didn't want the foreign worker. And the answer was that because since his wife had died many years ago, he couldn't live with anyone. He just couldn't. He couldn't have another person in the house. And we discussed the fact that the foreign worker would have their own room and that they wouldn't spend all their time with him and that he'd have plenty of space and privacy. And we talked about the fact that a foreign worker is not a marriage or not like a loving relationship. So he you know, if it didn't work out, they could send him away. And we talked about all the different things. And at the end of the day, he agreed. He didn't say no. He said that we could put in the paperwork and he would consider it when it was time to go home. So we took a step forward. Now, I think there are a couple of things that are important to know here. Change is really, really hard. Care of the older adult is all about making change. Every time you suggest something to your parents, we're asking them to make a change, okay? And anyone here who's worked in management knows that change management is a whole process that involves planning and getting people invested and getting people to agree. And you have to do it slowly, because if you make a change too quickly, it doesn't stick. So it's the same as working with your parents, or for me, when I'm working with my clients, is that change has to be slow. And actually, Neely brought this to my attention. We worked together recently on a course, and she talked about the fact that care management is about getting from A to B. Okay, so if A is the client at home without care and B is the client at home with care, it's you know, we need to try and get them, as care managers, we need to try and get them from A to B. And sometimes we don't get all the way from A to B. Sometimes we get part of the way. So I think that we have to accept that we're making change, that we need everyone on board, we need everyone to agree, we need everyone invested, and it's a slow process that we have to do gradually. So it might involve just getting help in the house a couple of hours a day, rather than someone full-time. But it's about making meaningful change happen slowly. And I think the last point I want to make before I bring up the case study is that there's no ideals, okay? It's not going to be ideal. And somebody asked the question in the chat about how do we make them? We can't make them, okay? We have to bring them around. We have to make change slowly. And at the end of the day, it doesn't have to be ideal, and it doesn't have to be perfect, and it doesn't have to be exactly how you would want it as well. It just has to be good enough. It has to be good enough that the person isn't in danger, that we're not crossing the red lines. Okay, so maybe they won't have a shower every day. So maybe the food won't be that fresh, or maybe the food, it's not going to be a gourmet meal. But the main thing is that they're safe. Okay, so sometimes it's not ideal. And I think the most important point is that A very, very clever geriatrician once told me that that people have the right to make bad decisions, and that's true of our elderly parents as well. They have the right to make bad decisions, and I think it's always going to be just a question of how bad the decision is, and again, when their safety comes into question. And we're actually going to talk about safety in the second part of the webinar, so I'm not going to address that right now, but I'm going to give you the example of Mr. Cohen because it's a practical example. I'm sure there are points here that you guys can associate with. He's an 80-year-old widower. He has 2 daughters, one who lives abroad and one who lives in Ramat Golan. And he lives alone in an apartment in Kiryat Yovel in Jerusalem. He requires some assistance with his daily function, so like with showering and dressing, etc. But he needs a lot of assistance with managing his household. He has many chronic conditions and had back problems, and he's fallen 3 times recently, which is a lot. And he refuses outside help. He insists that he manages fine and that his daughter helps him with what he needs. And he's very stubborn, and he says, "I raised her. Now it's her turn to help me." His daughter Shira travels from Ramat HaGolan 2 to 3 times a week to assist him. And Shira has her own career and family. Okay, so this is a scenario which is putting a lot of pressure on Shira to look after her father, pressure which is affecting her own life, and her father's refusing outside help and actually insisting that she provides it because, you know, she's his daughter. And the question here is, you know, what is the extent of her responsibility, given that he's unwilling to cooperate, care for himself, or accept outside help? And you know, this is always the big question. But I mean, at the end of the day, I think that as children of, and as we call ourselves the sandwich generation, we have a right to our own lives. We have to look after our own families as well. We have to look after our own health. We have to be able to have a parnasa, and therefore, at some point, sometime, you know, this is in theory, this gentleman is a responsible adult who needs to take responsibility for his actions, and if he's not accepting help, you know, somewhere something has to give here. And actually it is, we generally say that it is legitimate for her to not continue to bear sole responsibility, that she can actually share the responsibility. And this is where we would suggest to Shira that she got in a care manager is an excellent solution, but it doesn't have to be a care manager. Got someone to assist her in getting help into the house. And sometimes we even will go as far to say, Shira, take the week off. You know, your father might need to get a neighbor to look in on him, see if you can get someone local to have a look in on him. But he needs to realize that, you know, that he's going to have to accept assistance, that you can't necessarily continue to provide it all. And, you know, there is another daughter who's not in the country, but I mean, this is something we face often with particularly with Olim, is that there will be aging parents, and there will be children here and children overseas, and the truth is that the responsibility does need to be shared, even though it might not be the physical responsibility, because obviously someone in America might not necessarily be able to provide the same hands-on help, but it might be financial responsibility. It might be involving to convince her father that Shira can no longer take on that assistance, and something we often do is we actually sit families down and we explain what, you know, we sit down, and sometimes we're talking big families, 4, 5, 6 children. We have what we call a family conference, and we explain the situation as it is. Looking at the statistics in Israel, even in families with multiple children, most of the responsibility tends to fall on one child. And generally it's a woman, and generally it's a healthcare provider. That's the statistics of who provides care, who are what we call B'nai Mishpacha Metapel here in Israel. But it doesn't have to be like that. And I've seen many cases where we've successfully engaged other family members in the care of the parents, when it wasn't traditionally their roles. It wasn't even that they didn't want to be involved. It's more that they just weren't involved. That wasn't the dynamic. So yes. And I'm going to hand over to Harav Sherlock.
Thank you very much, Amanda, for bringing up many of the considerations that go into giving care to our parents. And you mentioned a few things, and I'm just going to zero in on two of them. Number one, you mentioned that as much as we want to care for them, we're not always going to get perfection. And sometimes it's going to be care, but not 100% because of the sensitivities that you mentioned. And number two, feasibility. The very fact is that if a child's living in Ramat Golan and their father lives alone in Kiryat Yovel, it's just not feasible for the daughter or the son to be there for them all the time. Which leads exactly into what Rav Sherlo, I would like to ask him to speak about, and that is, what do you do in these cases, halakhically and ethically, where in order to give proper care to parents, you may have to say what we call in English a little white lie, and say to them, no, it's just for this or that or the other thing. But the bottom line is, we're not telling them the whole story because we care for them. That's the first thing I want to ask Rav Sherlo. And beyond that, to also ask a more serious question, and that is, what happens when not giving them the care will actually lead to real, clear, and present danger, literally a pikuach nefesh mamashi. So without further ado, Rav Yuval Sherlo, Rosh Yeshiva of Harot Shaul, and the head of the ethics department at Zohar. Harav, bevakasha.
Shalom, everybody, and thank you for being with us. I think it's really a very, very important issue and a sensitive one, and it's a part of life, and we have to face it. I will not speak from the therapy perspective. I will speak from the halachic perspective that actually is very, very similar to what we heard from Amanda. But I'll start with the image. The image is because one of the 10 commitments is kabed et avicha v'et imecha. You should honor your parents. In many cases, people feel that this is a commitment, an obligation, without any boundaries, they're not under any conditions. It should be do everything that your parents want. More than that, our observation point or our beginning, our departure of dealing with those issues is starting with the idea of freedom of choice, of the idea that the parents want to be responsible on their life. They don't want to lose their freedom. They don't want to bring strange people into the house and whatever. So we many times think that this is our commitment and our obligation without any boundaries. But the truth is that according to halacha, it's not right. First of all, in principle, everything that we deal with, there's nothing in halacha without boundaries. Really nothing. Shabbos, must keep Shabbos, but you know that pikuach nefesh is doche Shabbat. Yeah, that's the simple example, but actually there's nothing except the idea of the first commitment is Anochi Hashem Elokecha. Nothing doesn't have anything without boundaries. Therefore, always we should think and we should try to find what are the consequences that every principle should be applied. In our case, we have at least 3 boundaries. The first one is where we are convinced they are misreading reality. Yeah, that they do not perceive the situation accurately. That's the first situation, because we are talking according to halacha about freedom of choice when someone is making reasonable, even we don't have to agree. We don't have to think that this is the best thing for him. As we heard before from Amanda, people have the right to make also wrong decisions. But when there is a situation where they don't receive the situation completely and they are misreading the reality, this is one case that one boundary that we have to understand. That's the time that we should make the decisions, and that's the time that not everything that they think or want that we'll do is the right thing, and we're committed to do that. The second situation is when it's harms someone else. We have many cases, we're being asked about situations where let's say the husband doesn't want a foreign worker at home, but his wife is collapsing. And because she is collapsing and she cannot do it anymore, she cannot continue anymore. And actually his decisions, it's not only him, because it causes damages to someone else. So in many cases in halacha, we say, okay, this now we have to balance. Now we have to consider and to find a way how to control both sides and all sides. The second thing, and that's something that people really don't know enough about the kibud av em and the commitment to honor our parents. When someone else is paying, every decision causes prices to someone else. The Mishnah says, and I think it's fascinating, it's a real surprise, that the Mishnah says when, for example, when your father loses his wallet, or when you lose his wallet, your wallet, what wallet should you search first? And the halacha says yours. And the Gemara, this is a Mishnah, and the Gemara is expanding this to a general rule, Shelcha kodem lishel kol adam. Now it seems very selfish that you can take care of yourself before you're taking care of anyone else. But actually it's a very, very important, I'll call it even the spine of the halacha. The halacha recognizes two things. First of all is the fact that we have needs. We have things that it's completely legitimate that our needs will be fulfilled. That's one thing. But many commentators say it's not only taking care of ourselves or our partners and our children and our all the social situation that we live in. It's also we will not be able to take care of our parents if our needs will not be solved, because it will cause anger, it will cause all kinds of consequences that will cause a lot of damage even to them. So therefore, this is the third boundary. And when we are finding ourselves that the price that we have to pay is too heavy, and it's actually dismisses our personality, our lives, our family, all the other things that we are connected to. So these are the boundaries where the halacha says we should find a different solution, and as I said before, balance between all those sides. Saying that, we have to emphasize 2 points. The first one is that it's not a zero-sum game. Yeah, this is not a situation where one side must lose for the other to win. Yeah, it's a process, and it's a process slowly, carefully, trying to convince, trying to cooperate, trying to pursue, trying to do all kinds of things. Do it, as we heard before, do it slowly, because we are not permitted to lose our sensitivity in our honor, in our respect, in our commitments towards our parents. We are making decisions that maybe they are not 100% what they want, but moving and shifting from doing everything to understanding that this is a situation where we must slowly conduct and control the situation in their house and in their life. It should be very, very slowly and sensitive, not immediately from 1 to 0. And we are obligated to act with conscience, with gentleness, and the like, how we do other things. The second thing that I want to emphasize is that all all the things that we said until now are when it's a common situation, a regular situation. When we are talking about dangerous situations, and we realize that they cannot really take care of themselves not because they're making wrong decisions, because they don't read the situation correctly and they can't follow all the instructions and all the restrictions in order to save their life, then our commitment is much heavier. As we read 2 days ago in the Torah, "Lo ta'amod al dam re'echa," it's also part of our commitments to take care of people that are endangering themselves, and we have to be very responsible to this situation. Are we permitted, and you ask a very good question, are we permitted to use all kinds of, I'll call it tools, that are not 100% pure? The best example is, can we say, not say the truth in 100%? Again, it depends what is the situation and what is actually the consequences of everything that we do. In general, I'll start the same way as I said before. First of all, we're starting with honoring, and we're starting off understanding that people have freedom of choice even to make wrong decisions, but there are boundaries. The same thing is with truth and skipping the 100% commitment towards the truth, because we start from the idea that we are committed to say the truth. And as you know, it's the only thing in the Torah, only commitment in the Torah, that the Torah says not only don't lie, but you have to be far from that. Midvar sheker tirchak. Create a distance from not saying the truth. But we know in many cases in halacha where the truth wasn't said, even, and our sages, Chazal, said more than twice, I think even maybe 6 times, even the divine, even Ribono Shel Olam didn't say the truth exactly. The Chazal are giving all kinds of examples. For instance, the Ribono Shel Olam didn't quote Sarai Menu when she laughed about Abraham, but you know what? Pesach is not far away, and the story of the redemption from Egypt started with go to Pharaoh and tell him we want to go for 3 days. And this is the first. This is one of the. It's a question. Why did Ribono Shel Olam use this term and didn't say we want to go to the land of Israel and go back to our land, etc.? But this is not the truth. Okay, the 3 days. I'm not explaining why, but we see that when there is, as I said before, there's nothing that is always right. There's no value, no principle in halacha or in values in general that is always the right thing to do. We start with saying the truth, but if we need, in order to protect our parents, in order to try to convince them, in order to pursue them, to not to say the direct truth, and it's a necessity. I want to emphasize, it's not a shortcut. When it's a shortcut, we have to control ourselves and say, no, we'll go, even it's a long way, we'll say the truth, because this is our commitment towards the important value of saying emet. But if from the other hand, they are in danger, or if in the other hand, we are other side of the coin, we can't handle the situation without saying not the exact truth, we have many sugiyot that actually are teaching us be careful, but this is the right thing to do. So if I'm trying to summarize, I want to emphasize again 3 points. The first point is that we have a assumption. In our pre-assumption, our parents have the right to make their decisions, and we have to honor it, and they even have the right to make wrong decisions, at least from our perspective. So the second thing is there are boundaries. When it's dangerous, when someone else has to pay the price, when it's harming other people, and special point of view that we have to consider is when we are convinced, and I'm emphasizing this word, convinced that they are not reading the situation correctly. The third thing is when this is the situation, then it's not as I said, a 1-0 game. We have to do it in a very sensitive way. We have to do it slowly. We have to invest time in order to do it in the right way. It's not that once this is the right thing to do, we are breaking everything. Slowly. And many times, my commander in the army used to say, slowly, לאט לאט זה הכי מהר. Slowly is the faster way to do complicated things, and I believe in it. So these are the 3 principles that I wanted to emphasize regarding when Mommy says no.
Thank you very much, Rav Sherlow. And based on those 3 principles that you just summarized for us, I'd like to address a question both to Amanda and to Rav Sherlow regarding the fact that we understand that it's not the end-all game, and maybe we can't get to a perfection when dealing and trying to care for our parents. But let's say that we can be a little sophisticated. Say they don't want to take the medicine, or we can put it into their drink without them knowing. Or vice versa, they don't want to eat a certain food, we make sure to hide it. Do you think that if indeed we're talking about a situation that will cause potential danger, these things would be permitted?
If it's a halachic word, I'll start with the halachic perspective, and then I want to hear what Amanda has to say from the from the other point of view. But from the halachic perspective, I'll say something and I'm very careful what I'm saying. In halacha, there is, first of all, I'll call it a departure point, and that is don't. על 3 דברים העולם עומד, על האמת, על הדין ועל השלום. We have to be people that are saying the truth. And this is the first option that we have to check. Can we go straight? Even if it will take time, even if it maybe we'll have to make some concessions or whatever, but we should go straight for many reasons. Because it's a very important value, but also from the realistic way. When you start with all kinds of tricks, many times you find yourself in a contradiction between all kinds of things, and you lose the trustee, the trust that they get for other things, and the confidence and whatever. So therefore, this is the first way that we have to try. But when, as you said, when there is a danger, and when there is a way that a situation, that we can't do that, and they don't get the medicine, or they eat the wrong food or whatever, then we must do that. But again, I want to, if I have 2 minutes, I want to tell you something about how I'm teaching my students in ethics. According to the Israeli law, when you have, there are 3 conditions in order to drive your car reverse. Okay, the law says the following: when you think that when you want to drive reverse, you have first of all to be sure it's necessary. That's the first principle, necessity. The second principle is as less as possible, yeah, that it has to be also a not only necessity, but also, excuse me, the amount of meters that you are driving backwards. And the third principle is you have to check very good and all around if you are not causing damage by driving reverse. Now, not saying the truth is driving reverse. And there are situations where we have to go backwards and drive our values in reverse. But we have to ask ourselves three things, and I think it's according to general ethics and also the halacha. First of all, is this necessary? We have to check it if it's there is a necessity, as I said before. Did we try, first of all, to do it in the straight way? The second thing is to do it in a limit, as less as possible, to use all those skills or all those instruments, I'll call it, by not saying the truth. And the third one, check very well if you're not, opening one door, but actually losing in the other door, losing trust in yourself and relationship. You have to be very careful to check the damage that can be caused because using those ways and those words that you say or activities that you do, and you'll pay the price later.
Thank you very much, Rav Sherlow. And I'd like Amanda to please add on a practical level, knowing that it's reverse, as Rav Sherlow said, but at the other hand, it's necessary.
Look, I think that it's all about, again, not about ideal. Things don't have to be ideal. So I actually, when it comes to food, I'm very much, with my older adult population, and I do look after a very frail population. I'm less, I'm less pushy about things like that. And I generally tell family members, so they've got diabetes, whatever, they need to enjoy life, etc. But there are red lines. And safety is a really big red line. And the topic of medication is a really big one because there are medications that, that if taken inappropriately, they can kill or make people very ill, such as insulin or blood thinners, etc., or blood pressure medications. So, there are red lines. And, the other red line is things like safety, like, gas in the house, are they going to forget to leave the gas on, or driving a car, or, can they go out? Are they going out on their own, and is there potential they might get lost? And here we're really dealing with more so with a population of older adults who suffer from dementia or memory loss. When safety becomes an issue, I think what I say is I don't like using tricks or white lies. I don't like using that terminology. I say that we have to get creative. And we have to find creative ways of continuing to respect our parents and look after them respectfully, and stopping, the behavior that could lead to their downfall or for them to be damaged. And I think one thing we haven't mentioned, which I think is really important, is that keeping our parents safe is part of respecting them. It's one of the biggest parts of respecting them. So, and sometimes that will involve, finding a creative option to, and I often say to families, you need to lock up the medications. You need to lock them up. They need to be in a locked cupboard where they don't have access to them. Or when it comes to receiving care, I'll be like, just tell one thing that people often do with me is that they will tell their elderly parent that I am their friend. Okay, my friend Amanda's coming over to talk to you, and I'm coming over to do a geriatric assessment, but they'll be like, and then the parent will say to me, how do you know my daughter? So, it's almost a creative a creative way to do something which will protect your parents. And I'm not going to go into driving in depth because it's a whole issue on its own, but I've said to sometimes to children, the keys need to go permanently missing, or the car needs to be permanently broken. Remove that spark plug because it's too dangerous. So I think when it comes to you got to assess the red line, because if it's just about eating the wrong things or not having a shower, I don't think it's such a big deal. But I think if it's about taking the wrong medications or getting lost in the summer in Israel when it's very hot, that's when we have to, make a change. And the thing is, it doesn't have to be you. It can be the doctor, it can be the care manager, it can be somebody else that gives them that makes the decision, not necessarily the child that makes that decision. And that's why I always say you need to get in these situations, particularly when there is a risk. Sometimes you need to get outside help. Sometimes you can ask the Rav to intervene. Sorry, I know there's a lot of Rabbanim involved here, but that's sometimes something that we suggest to someone who believes that, to discuss it with their Rav, because, sometimes if it's a person that has what we call in Hebrew samchut, someone that they trust and etc., who says, and it's not the daughter who's just telling them what to do. Sometimes that's the way you'll get them to make the change, or you'll get it over the line. But as I said, I don't really talk about tricks or lies. I say we just have to get creative when it comes to making these changes, because when a person's safety is at risk, the best way to respect your parents is to make sure that they're safe.
I want to continue exactly from where you left off, Amanda, and to ask both Rav Sherlo and you a very sensitive question. And that is that, thank God, parents have a few children and they're all looking out for the well-being of their parents, but they don't agree on the care. If I can give one example, I won't say the name of the rabbi, but at the end of his life, he was demented, unfortunately. And one part of the family felt that if he sees people, it will bring back his mind. And the other part said, no, let them remember my father the way he was and not see him the way he is. Who should be the one that makes decisions when indeed there isn't, I would say, consensus as to what to do for the parents? Rav Sherlo.
I don't know. I mean, it's a good question, but I think that every family is different. I mean, you cannot say who is the decision maker in a family, because it's all kind of dynamics in every family. I think that the best thing that's what we are doing in Zohar Ad 120 is to come to a common decision. And there is a process to create such a thing. Our hotline, Zohar Ad 120, when a family calls the hotline, they get a team of a rabbi that is really very, very educated and professional in the field of decisions of end of life, and a social worker, a very, very qualified one. And the idea is that it's not only the right thing to do, but actually to make the whole family say the same thing. And that is because of 3 reasons. The first one, in most of the cases, when there is a common decision, it's the best one. I mean, it's a good decision, but medically and whatever. The second thing is that you can work with it. I mean, you're not open the door in your question. Someone opens the door, someone is closing the door, whatever. The third thing is the common decision is very important. What will happen in the future for the family? Because many times when there's not a common decision, then after the father dies, then the family splits and it's a disaster, because some say we gave, we actually intimidated him, and we had to stop much earlier, and some say we gave up too early, and they don't speak with each other, etc. So therefore, in this case, I'm saying the same thing. Instead of asking who is controlling, finding a mediator or a profession that will, everyone will sit together, everybody will, first of all, will express his opinion and his vision and his thoughts, and then they'll find a way, some, compromise or concessions, or I don't know, and how, but this is the best thing to do, and this is one of our big recommendation to every family that are arguing about many issues towards end of life. Find a way to make a common decision, because this is the best decision, and it's good for your parents, and it's good for you.
I have to say that Rav Sherlock gave the perfect response. I have nothing to add to that. Mediation. Families disagreeing is a very common issue, and you really need to get everyone in a room and find the best solution for everyone.
Okay. And I'd like to add another question that was asked in the chat, and that is not about care and not about food, but about something else. One of the things that make people feel very independent is the ability to drive. For some reason or another, that's like the height of independence for many. If I can just quote from my own family, my grandfather is not with us now for many decades, but he had Parkinson's at the end of his life. His mind worked, but obviously the body shaking. I was in the car with him, as was my cousins. We never dared to say a word, but the car kept on swerving right to left because of his shaking and because of what Parkinson's does to a body. In such a situation, what do you suggest? On the one hand, it's dangerous for them to drive. And in general, driving is not something that's not dangerous. And all the more so if you have a condition. But on the other hand, that would be sort of lachtom, as we say in the halacha, it would be stimat golal. They would understand, I'm finished. You're taking away my license, my life is over.
From a professional perspective, driving, I think, is one of the most sensitive issues that we face with our older adult population. And it's the quickest way to lose a patient is to suggest that they stop driving. Literally they will. So yes, but the issue with the driving, I think someone wrote on the chat that it's grey. It is grey because the ability to drive requires many different bodily functions, whether it's not just about cognition, it's about reflexes and muscle strength and everything else, and eyesight and hearing and so many things. And unfortunately, as the body ages physiologically, a lot of these systems just age with the body. So driving is an issue, a physiological issue at some point. The thing is that the issue is it's also not just unsafe for the driver, it's unsafe for other people, because there are many people on the roads, other cars, there are children, there are pedestrians. So that's the other issue with driving. But you can have an assessment. You can have a medical assessment that will determine whether or not you're safe to drive. And that's what I recommend to people, is that, I'm not going to make the decision for you. I obviously encourage families to try and stop the driving in a respectful, agreeable manner. And some people agree. But when it becomes an issue, I do suggest that they go and have a driving assessment. And they have driving assessments. There's a list of places that do driving assessment on the Misrad HaRishoy website, if somebody just asks where you can get an assessment.
If I could step in and add something, I see here like a very lively conversation in the chat, and I think it really expresses both sides here, because some of you wrote that it's disrespectful not to address, and like also being quiet and not saying something. I think I see so many families that are like afraid to raise issues with their parents, and that's also being avoiding. But addressing issues can sometimes be very disrespectful. And I just want to mention a term that's brought in the psychological literature of aging that for me was really changed a lot, which is called filial maturity. It's the way the emotional abilities of adult children to care for their parents. On the one hand, like not to be consumed by the caring and like be really all mixed up in it, but also not to run away. And there's a list of, first of all, most families don't reach this maturity. It's okay. And most of us are not there. But this ideal picture of what is the perfect relationship, I think helps us have like some kind of tamrul, sometimes some kind of guidance. And there's a whole list of elements that that help to have this relationship. And it's like goodwill and solidarity and love. And then Liora Bartu, an Israeli psychologist, adds two other elements, and they're kind of opposite, but one is authority and the other is compassion. And I feel that the combination of these two is exactly what was going on here in the chat. Like, I hear children and I feel like sometimes they're afraid to be in the place of authority, but really that's our responsibility. But if it comes without compassion, so chaval al hazman, as we say, so I think it's felt. I think it's felt by the parents if it comes from a place that has compassion. So it's that fine line, I think, where you're coming from. If you're still respecting them and have compassion and seeing their wishes, their values, also understanding their values are maybe different than mine, but also really daring to step up and say.
And this leads me to another question that came up, and I think it's an important one, and that is the how do we deal with the emotional, not damage, but I would say repercussions from telling a parent you need a caregiver. And they understand it. In other words, they get it. They're not independent anymore for whatever reason, but emotionally, it kills them, quote unquote. If I can just share a story from my own community, one of my congregants had to eat on Yom Kippur, and they didn't want to. And they were very emotionally disturbed. They understood that's the halacha, but on the other hand, to eat on Yom Kippur is a misnomer for someone that's done it for over 80 years. And what eventually turned them over, of all things, is when I showed them the siddur, and I showed them that in Ya'aleh V'yavo, it says that if you eat on Yom Kippur, you say Ya'aleh V'yavo. And they said, wow, it's in the siddur? And that somehow calmed their nerves. So that was much more of an easier case than to say to someone, you now need a caregiver for the rest of your life. And my question that was asked is, how do you deal with that emotional repercussions on the person?
From my experience, you do two things. The first thing, as you did, you actually explain and you demonstrate and expose the fact that we are committed to halacha, not to our feelings. And feelings are very important, I'm not denying that. But I even many times say to those people in a much more extreme way, there's no halacha that you have to fast on Yom Kippur. There's halacha to do what the halacha says. When the halacha says that you have to fast on Yom Kippur, so you must do that, and if you are not doing that, it's a sin. But when the halacha says you aren't permitted to fast and it's dangerous for you or whatever, so actually that's exactly what you have to do. And it's not only to elderly people, it's to many times it's soldiers, maybe students in the army, or women that gave birth. That's one thing. The other thing that is very important is also to create something positive, not only negative, but also something positive. So if from now on you cannot fast on Yom Kippur, then let's find together something that you are adding to yourself on Yom Kippur, maybe studying Mishnah Yoma, whatever, I don't know, every depends what's the situation, but it's not only explaining the negative point of view, but also creating something positive. And both things are, making the emotional feelings softer. They're not declining completely, and they are there, and maybe you cannot fight it, but you can make it much more easier for people when they understand, first of all, why is it so important to obey what the halacha says from one end, and you are offering a positive, a new way of that they didn't do before, in order to fill the gap and the space that was created because we are stopping to fast on Yom Kippur.
I can translate that. I mean, that is the perfect way to put it, because I can translate that into the terms of, with a parent. Look, firstly, I think that we can accept that they're sad, and it's all right for them to be sad. And I think it's all right for them to have those negative emotions about this big change in their lives. But I think it's about, as I said, there is a positive side. I talked about it at the beginning when I talked about when there's a loss of something, we have to try and fill the void and replace it. So when there's a loss of function, we look for solutions to improve the function. So if we can show the older person the examples whereby having a caretaker might mean they'll see their grandchildren more, or because they'll be able to take them to visit the grandchildren, or that they'll be able to go into the kitchen and do some cooking that they couldn't do on their own, or find the things that they can do with the care worker that they were unable to do on their own. Suddenly we're finding the positive bits that will actually help improve their function. So I completely identify with what Rav Sherlow said in terms of you have to find the positive aspects in that. Also, the children can express to their parents that it's good for me. Sometimes that helps too. The parents don't want to be a burden. So it's okay for the kids to say to their aging parents, this is better for me. I sleep better at night now knowing that someone's in the house with you. I'm getting my work done better because I'm less anxious about you. I'm able to spend more time with my husband. So often a parent will be happy that they're actually, by getting the carer in, they're actually providing their child with those more positive feelings. So yeah, find something positive. That's the way to do it.
Thank you very much. I think we addressed the questions. If there's Neely, anything you would like to add before we sum up, please.
I think a lot was said. Yes.
I want to say
Sure.
one word. One word: sensitivity. After dealing with all those aspects, sensitivity is the framework that we have to work inside of that, and doing it in a very, being patient and doing it slowly in a process. But we have to understand that this is the situation, and we have to achieve the goals and that are being very important in order to protect, in order to save life, in order to fulfill their needs and whatever. But very sensitivity is a good word.
Maybe I'll just add, I see there are more questions, but I do think we need to wrap up in a few minutes. I think it was mentioned before that having someone else step in, like a Rav, like a doctor, like a gerontologist, a care manager, we really want to stay their children. We want to stay and have a relationship. And sometimes all these arguments take that away from us. The arguments, the being their secretary, their medical person, their everything. So it takes off many times to have someone else step in, and you could just be, and I see this also between spouses, right? Like we want to stay like mutual and supporting. So I think that's a tip that's important to mention again.
And I just want to go over the point of nothing's perfect, and it's not about finding the ideal. It's finding what works for everyone. It's as Rav Sherlow said, it's about being sensitive. It's about being empathic. It's about maintaining good family relationships, and not doesn't necessarily have to be the ideal situation. And I really strongly encourage people to get assistance. These situations are incredibly stressful, incredibly difficult. There are experts, specialists, care managers, people out there that can do the things that you're doing in hours and hours in much shorter time. They have the experience, they have the contacts, they have the ability. They're not emotionally involved. And I highly recommend seeking assistance. Don't try and manage this on your own. That's my biggest recommendation.
Thank you very
Sada
much.
Gamora. Thank you. I wanted to thank Amanda, Rav Sherlow, and Neely for joining us this evening. I think you gave us not only tips for how to deal with this issue, but more importantly, you gave us chomer lamachshava, a lot of things to think about beyond the Zoom, about how to prepare such a situation of aging parents, how to deal with it both emotionally and physically, and to make those hard decisions when needed. On the one hand, giving them the independence that they absolutely deserve, but on the other hand, caring for them to the best of our abilities. Thanking everyone for joining us this evening. To the question of many, this is recorded and will be up on YouTube for those that came in a little late or would like to re-listen to it. Once again, thanking Amanda, Rav Sherlo, and Neely, and wishing everyone a good night.
Good night. Thank you.
Thank you very much.